This is a Relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It's good to be back on the show, friends. After a couple of days away, more on that coming up in Positive Reflections. But it is the first episode of the week, and you know what that means. It means that in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, we're joined by a wonderful friend of the show, a national columnist and media commentator, former senior staffer in Canada's Prime Minister's office, Supriya Dwivedi. But there's an interesting and I think what's going to be a valuable addition to our conversation today. If you've been paying even a little bit of attention to Canada's media landscape over the past couple of years, you no doubt know Rachel Gilmore's name. She's not just a journalist. She's not just a media entrepreneur, for that matter. She's become, in a way, a lightning rod for Canada's ongoing culture war. And that's not by accident. The machine, and by that we're referring to the organized right-wing outrage machine, more on that in a minute, has Rachel squarely in its sights. You've seen it. We've talked about it on this show with Supriya, former Conservative leader, House leader, member of Parliament, Andrew Scheer, tweeting out clips of Rachel's work as if to rally a mob. Ben Mulroney, yes, that Ben Mulroney, dogpiling on Rachel on social media over what was, in my estimation, a pretty routine piece of reporting. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The coordinated campaigns of harassment, threats, and attempts to discredit Rachel's credibility, not through journalism, not through evidence, but through sheer intimidation. In our most recent catch-up with Supriya, she wondered why Canada's Francophone journalists had taken up the story while Anglophone mainstream media had not. So we figured it was time that we got into it here on Real Talk. And so in this episode of the show, we welcome, as per usual, Supriya Dwivedi and Rachel Gilmore. A very good morning to you both, and thank you for being here. Supriya, why was it so important for us to get Rachel on the show ASAP?
I mean, I think you kind of just laid it out there. You and I were kind of musing about it, and we were talking about how ridiculous it is that every time the right-wing rage machine kind of goes after Rachel with, very predictable results. But what really got me was this complete break in coverage between Anglophone mainstream or legacy media and Francophone mainstream legacy media. And, you and I can dance around it and we can talk about it in a lot of ways, but I figured we would want to hear from Rachel directly and get her take on some of this because, I mean, why did the Francophone media cover this while it's been like nary a mention in all of the Anglo newspapers? I haven't really seen it covered on any of the, those political panel shows that I myself am on every now and again. And so it was just weird to me that Tout le monde en parle and, major papers in Quebec, like Le Devoir, covered it. And yet again, nothing on this side in terms of English media, except for of course, we talked about it. The Tyee covered it. Halifax Examiner, I think, did as well. And Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going from memory here. Hill Times may have also covered it as well. Yeah. So yeah, but Rachel, I mean, you tell me, why do you think that is like a weird kind of break here?
It's hard because I don't know. Like, I have no way of knowing for sure. I do remember that one of the last times, like when I had that whole debacle with CTV, for those of you who might not be familiar, I had a fact-checking segment with CTV's Your Morning during the election. We did the first segment, announced it, and the right-wing backlash was wild online, including from someone who a week prior had been one of Pierre Poilievre's primary spokespeople. And CTV pulled the segment, and they told me, and I recorded and published this, that it was simply because they didn't have the bandwidth for the backlash. So I know in that situation, because I'm still friends with people who work in mainstream media, that some people tried to pitch this story and people were like, I don't think so. Like, there just wasn't that interest, even though it was there was a lot of online interest. So it's really hard to say. Like I part of me wonders if it's an aversion to reporting on like fellow journalists. I feel like people get weird about that. Also like I wonder if the first name on that Charlie's Murderers website that I was put on as the first name was a different Canadian, was someone who wasn't a journalist. I question whether maybe they would have reported it because they love a Canadian angle of a US story. That's like I don't know, it's their favorite thing. So I don't know, like part of me tries not to take it personally. Like, is it a Rachel Gilmore thing? Is it that they think I'm too controversial? Is that why maybe I don't get calls to do that many panels, any panels in English? But I just genuinely don't understand how it could be newsworthy in French and not in English. And the only thing I can come back to is that in the French language media, there's at least less of a risk of the backlash because you're not going to have those American elements who don't speak French clipping and, skewing and using the footage of any interview they do with me for clicks in the same way that happens when I do them in English.
Rachel, you're different than the average journalist in a couple of different ways. Congratulations on the relatively early success of your bubble pop empire. I don't know anybody that's working harder right now, that's hustling harder to make it happen and tell their own stories
so tired.
As an independent. It would probably, when things go well, I don't know if you'd want to push back on media entrepreneur. I'm a media entrepreneur. It's kind of how we're making our living right now. An independent journalist is probably how people would phrase it, but that wasn't necessarily your first choice, right? Like you were canned from the same company that used to employ Supriya and myself quite some time ago, right? Isn't that fair? Isn't that fair to say, Supriya? Am I wrong? I'm not wrong, right? You were let go. Right, and then
I was laid off.
You were laid off.
The only reason I make that distinction is a lot of people try to imply it was with cause, and it's a very important distinction that like it was part of a budgetary decision. Now, maybe is there a chance that my name came up in those meetings for like I don't know why they chose me and not someone else. You never really know when they're just like naming a bunch of people to get rid of. I like maybe something I did, like maybe the fact that I was pushing to cover certain stories or wasn't going to shut up about the death threats I was getting. And they didn't love that. I think it was a bit of a liability.
Rachel, what kind of stories though? Like just for the listeners and the viewers to paint it out. Yeah.
So, I had a couple stories that I really fought for that didn't either ultimately were published, but I had to like literally frustration cry to an editor being like, come on, this is important. Those were generally on far right extremism in Canada and what is now the largest white nationalist group in Canada, which is Diagolon. And even then, like even though a lawyer who looked at the story told me that we didn't have to reach out to these guys because they're far-right extremists who had repeatedly threatened me. They said, you don't have to reach out. Like, I think we'd be fine just going with it, using quotes from their podcasts and stuff. My editors made me reach out to these guys, like who had threatened me personally, to get comment from them. And I did. And then they basically like re-edited the story to add in so much of like one of these guys' rantings that I just like, so it was things like that where I maybe wouldn't have personally chosen to include that much of his pushback on what people with PhDs in extremism and like national security are saying. But anyway, like, so just like editorial disagreements. And then also I had a story on Shireen Abu Akleh, the Palestinian American journalist who was killed by the IDF in the West Bank. And that story was basically killed by delay, where it took like 2 months for them to edit it, even though I spoke to 3 people who knew her personally, including the cameraman who filmed her murder. And one of the reasons I was given for the story not being published was, in the end, when I pushed back several times, was that I didn't have enough sources in the story. And I had 3 people who knew her personally, who spoke to me within weeks of her being murdered, which was also just made me feel incredible guilt, because I was like, oh, these people like bared their souls to me about their friend, and I didn't get the story published, So that was hard. So there were a few moments like that, but primarily it was the reporting on far-right extremism that I came up against, especially as I started getting more threats for the work. Their response to that was like, maybe let's be careful having you write this story. Like I once pitched a story on far right extremism, and they actually had another journalist write it because they were worried about how much backlash I would get. And I was kind of like, so I don't get my scoops because you're worried I'm going to get too much backlash. Like, it's just like, it's kind of punishing the victim further to take me off of a beat I'm passionate about, or, take away a story that I'm passionate about, because of the fact that people are having a visceral response to it that they don't necessarily have to the same degree when it's a man doing this reporting.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Well, not funny, but I guess funny nonetheless. Is that just
funny, weird?
Yeah. It's that when I was, at Chorus hosting the morning show, and I would be getting inundated with like death and rape threats, and then they started going after my, then 1-year-old daughter.
Jesus.
The management solution was for me to like just take my email off and my contact off of all of the websites, like the actual page for the show, and like the different Chorus like website that was up there. So it was just like, well, that's bad too, because people contact me all the time through those forums to be able to give me or my producer a bit of a heads up on something, or just sometimes it's nice to hear from listeners that are normal, right, and have criticism for you, but they're not threatening you with harm. And it's really sad that they should have, learned, I think, from my stuff, and you came along a few years later, and yet they didn't. And I think we're at a point now where, do you think that there's like a real risk of entire newsrooms not covering huge swaths of stories because they're just, there is this manufactured, inorganic kind of outrage machine out there that the right is just so good at activating and unleashing, flying monkeys after people?
Yes, that is like the biggest risk from this, is that there are a lot of people who are in decision-making positions and upper management putting pressure on those in decision-making positions who never really took social media all that seriously, kind of viewed it as I guess we have to do this, and, looked at it as like a lesser form of or a lesser part of the job of doing journalism, even though it's a method of communication. And at the end of the day, our job is communication. But because they never took it seriously, they never learned how it can be gamed. And so they fall for it every time. Like it goes back to a thing called Gamergate, where like these guys who were pissed off that there were like there were women making video games and, creating characters who weren't just a massive pair of boobs, that they were angry about that, but they claimed it was about ethics in gaming. And the media, because they kept saying, even though it was clearly in their actions, in what they were responding to, everything about it, it was clear that their goal was to push back against the increasingly feminist push, or just like not atrociously anti-feminist effort for change within the video game world. The media reported on it as if it was this legitimate debate between ethics and gaming and these women who for some reason think it's about this misogyny thing, and it's just, you don't have to both sides a bad faith argument. You can actually look at what people are trying to achieve and recognize the ways in which algorithms that are fueled by outrage and controlled by like despotic freaks like Elon Musk, like you can recognize the ways in which those shape our discourse and try to not fall for it, because otherwise you're just doing the bidding of these bad faith actors.
It's like, it's been wild to watch, and I appreciate you agreeing to come on the show and talk about it, because I would imagine like you're in a tough spot. On one hand, you're reporting. By the way, I love your bio on social media. Your least favorite person's least favorite journalist, or in this case, modernized, your least favorite person's least favorite award-winning journalist. So a shout out there. But on one hand, Rachel, I think because of the way that you deliver your commentary and the way that it's organized and rolled out, you have a lot of eyes on it. You have a very significant following, which means that the more that people are paying attention to it, the more controversy around it from a very cynical and tactical way is great for clicks. It's great for engagement. It's helped amplify your profile. While at the same time, the work that you do and the piling on that you experience, I have to imagine, is not only emotionally exhausting, would not only probably dissuade many people in your shoes from steering clear of doing what you're doing, but also probably, I would imagine, causes you to, I don't know if I want to use the word fear, but at least be hyper aware of your own safety in public or otherwise. Can you talk about that trade-off and really kind of, I hate to say what you signed up for, because I'm not saying that the treatment you've received is acceptable, but just your reality right now?
Yeah. It sucks. Like it's hard because like I'm so passionate about this work. Like the reason I got into journalism was because I wanted to just like ideally leave this world a little bit less awful than I entered it. You know, like I want to bring attention to issues impacting like marginalized groups, the things that make the world unfair. Like I want to stand up for the little guy. I want to stand up for like trans folks who are being unfairly persecuted. Like that one kid at the school who now can't play on a sports team that like they weren't, you know, meanwhile there's kids who hit puberty like way earlier than anyone else in their class. And like they have genetic advantages, but like no one's, you know, it's just like these bad faith arguments that target individuals who are vulnerable. I want to try to help them, and I don't want them to feel alone, because the reality is if I let the threats and everything get to me and stop doing this reporting, then that kid, they're not going to stop being bullied. They're not going to stop being targeted by lawmakers who are using them as pawns, even though there's clear studies showing that it increases the chances of trans kids leaving us, to use a euphemism. You know, they're more likely to kill themselves when these anti-trans policies are put in place. That kid's still going to be dealing with that. And all that's going to happen is they're going to lose a loud voice that was highlighting the cynical politics at play, the morally craven, attempts to obfuscate scandal by pointing people in the direction of hating a marginalized group. So I not to kind of move away from your question, because I will tell you about how all the dramatic ways it's ruining my life, because it is, but like I can't bring myself to stop, because I keep thinking about like that kid or the Palestinians who feel like they're not getting fair coverage from the mainstream media. You know, I'm not saying that I'm like the salve to all of this. I'm one person. We need a million versions of this, like pushing to tell these stories. But like, I can't bring myself to stop, because I really worry about what this world looks like if I give up and send that message to others who might be thinking of joining this push for a more empathetic and kind journalism that doesn't fall prey to this both sidesism that ultimately is gamed and used to make our world more cruel and like more fascist, for lack of a better word. So anyway, but it does suck. Like I've had to change how I live. I've had to, I have to be super paranoid all the time. I live in Montreal. That's not a spoiler. I'm pretty public about that. But, if I walk around a tourist area, I'll be honest, like every photo someone takes, I'm like, am I in the background of this? What if they post this immediately and the wrong person sees it? Like I have to tell friends if they come over not to take a picture that is out the window. Like if they get their phone out and, things like that. Like I have to do all of this extra stuff. I never really have more than like 2 drinks if I'm out and about. It's really rare that I do, because I'm scared that like, what if this is the day I run into that person? And it has happened. Like this woman traveled hours from Toronto to Montreal to clandestinely film me throughout an evening when I was watching my partner play a show at a tiny dive bar. And they filmed me the entire time while I was sitting there with friends, and then ambushed me out front to just like get clickbait video of me. And like, then she posted that immediately, and a bunch of people who follow her, who are involved with Diagolon, including its leader, were like in the comments. So, it's just like, this is all stuff that puts me in danger, because these are people who have said things like they would laugh if I was raped, that they would, I'm getting messages from people telling me they know where I live. Luckily, they don't usually provide receipts of that, so I have to assume assume, I hope that they're lying. Otherwise, how would I function? But yeah, it's like fundamentally changed how I live my life. But in the world that we're living in now, I would much rather have this microphone that I can use to try to help people and help the vulnerable, and deal with these repercussions than show people that this like gnarly, hateful, nasty like side of the internet is sufficient to silence that and make me stop. Because we're going to need a lot of people pushing back on that kind of hate to make any kinds of difference in the face of it.
Can I ask, Rachel, because you mentioned, everything that you've sort of had to deal with. How have the police been? You used to live in Ottawa, you live in Montreal now. Are different police forces, do they deal with the threats kind of differently? Do they take these social media threats seriously? Because, I mean, in my experience, and, the last one I would have gotten would have been a bit ago, but like, they didn't take it seriously at all. And even when, I had a death threat come in through my cell phone, very clearly telling me that they were going to kill me. And I called the Toronto police and they were like, well, what do you want us to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I have the number. Can you call this person and figure it out? And it was like, no, can do. Best we can do is have you fill out a form. And it's like, all right,
literally,
fine. Yeah.
It's always just a damn form. Like, I literally feel like what I'm doing every time I go to the police, and I've even joked about this to the police, what I feel like I'm doing is giving them the notes for if I'm murdered, like what they can look into. If I'm assaulted, what they can look into. Like all I'm doing is giving them the paper trails that they can be like, oh, I see how we got here after the violence happens, and like, I hope it never happens, but there's literally no preventative measures being taken. I had someone with a profile full of guns comment the date of one of my partner's like upcoming shows in Ottawa on social media and say he'll be there, maybe her too, tagging a bunch of friends. I called the Ottawa police. I was like, hey, this seems like they're planning something. And the Ottawa police told me, call us if he shows up. Like, sorry, I'll be busy ducking, like hiding from bullets. Like at that point, is there nothing we can do? It feels like they're just waiting for something to happen. And that either tells me, and, I've had lawyers kind of debate this. Like some of them have said the police are just being lazy because there's absolutely laws in the criminal code that if they had the wherewithal, they could use to go after these guys. But the police always tell me that, oh, well, if it's mafia language, like, oh, it'd be a shame if someone broke your leg. There's nothing we can do. And then when there is clear language, like, someone just told me they're going to rape me with a broken bottle, like that kind of thing. Someone said, you will be raped. We're coming. When that happens, they also tell me, well, they could be in the States. It's just a social media account. And
we don't know where they are. Yeah. They could be anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So they don't do anything. And it's so bad that like, I remember I eventually just started going public with them because that's actually the only way to stay safe. Like people don't realize that when all of the institutions that are supposed to protect you fail you, the only thing you can lean back on is community support and let people know that this thing is happening. So for me, what I've done is I've gone public with it. And then people in my community and in my surroundings and who I, interact with are aware that this is a situation, and it kind of creates more eyeballs. And like, I don't have to be the only one being hyper vigilant. And, it also exemplifies that this is a problem. But I once posted footage of a guy making a video saying stuff like, what happens to horses when they don't behave, with a whip sound, and he was pulling out a knife. There was something that looked like a gun on the table. I posted this on social media, and David Cochran from CBC DM'd me and said, oh my God, Rachel, this is really bad. Like, you should report this to the police. Definitely. This is a death threat. I did. And months later, the police told me this isn't a death threat under the criminal code. So like, it's frustrating because you're made to feel like what you're dealing with isn't that bad because they're telling you, oh, it doesn't meet the legal criteria. So you're like, well, if it's not illegal, then am I being dramatic? Like that's what people will always tell me. But clearly the laws just either need to catch up, or we need the police to understand the laws so that they're not just waiting for the next person to get killed.
I don't think that it's not a problem when anonymous trolls or accounts with no identifying feature, what have you, these anonymous accounts, these bots are going after anybody. Some of the threats that you've received are horrific or very troubling, of course, but everything hits another level when, for example, Andrew Scheer takes aim at you. I wanted to ask you about this. We can talk about Ben Mulroney in a second as well. He's just been rewarded with a big new gig for Global. But just a short time after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, you posted, it's terrifying. You said, I'm terrified to think how far-right fans of Kirk, aching for more violence, could very well turn this into an even more radicalizing moment. You wonder, will they now believe their fears have been proven right and feel they have a right to retaliate, regardless who actually was behind the initial shooting? Well, the former leader of the Conservatives and sitting MP, Andrew Scheer, amplifies it and posts, imagine how twisted she has to be that this is her first thought after a man was shot in the neck for expressing his views. So much hate in her, says Andrew Scheer, talking about you. What did you first think when you saw that, and how did that, if at all, amplify what you've been experiencing already?
Oh, it exploded it. Like, you know, he got tens of thousands of likes on that. Like, that was widely seen. And he put my words in a context that was so removed. Like, I wasn't saying that from a place of hate. I was saying that from a place of fear. And he also, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that he was reading my mind in the moments I saw that Charlie Kirk was murdered. Because he said that was my first thought. My first thought isn't what I posted on social media. I sat there horrified. It was a horrifying thing. The video, I saw it. It was horrifying. And, you know, I don't think anybody who wants, like, it's not an acceptable form of response to someone you disagree with. Like, I don't support the death penalty even when it's through a court of law. So even if I abhor the things he said, even if I think it's hate speech, like, I wouldn't support that response. But anyway, like, I was immediately proven right for the things that I said there. People started immediately agitating, saying this is war, all kinds of things. And we're seeing the Trump administration use this moment to crack down on their critics through things like designating Antifa a terrorist organization, even though it's just a philosophy and ideology with no concrete like organization or leaders. It's ludicrous. And that tells me that that can be weaponized to silence dissent, because if there is no organization, you can argue anyone's a part of it. So anyway, like, it was ludicrous. Like, when he posted that, things just exploded. I went from getting some pushback to getting like way more. And later in the day was when I found out I was placed on this website that listed people who were Charlie's murderers, who supposedly celebrated his murder. I think anyone reading my words there would know that that wasn't what I was doing. But Andrew Scheer was one of the first high-profile people to put my words in a context and frame them for the audience that as something twisted and hateful and putting intent behind them, when lots of other people made the same point that I made and didn't deal with the same backlash. I think in part because they didn't have that bad faith framing applied to their words. And it doesn't help that Pierre Poilievre's wife reposted this from Andrew Scheer. None of them have apologized. None of them have backed down. And I've even had constituents of Conservative MPs forward me responses that they've gotten when they reached out to their MP to express their disappointment with Andrew Scheer's public, attack on me. And those MPs are telling their constituents that what I said was ignorant, divisive, and went off on rants about Antifa. Like, this is how they're talking to the people in their ridings about this. As I'm dealing with this nonstop death threats, Andrew Scheer has never apologized. He's never tried to slow things down. A decent person would see the spiraling hate that I was dealing with and say, hey, I may have disagreed with how she initially said this, but you guys, can we cool it? Like, when you clearly have a role in that. But he didn't do that. And even more egregious, and it's hard not to be like a little personally hurt from this, because I used to be in the parliamentary press gallery. These people used to be my colleagues. And I watched Catherine Cullen interviewing Pierre Poilievre as he's saying that his family is at risk and dealing with more threats of violence, knowing that his wife just amplified this thing that created more of a threat environment for me. And, I'm just not seeing any pushback for like, okay, I agree with you, that's wrong. But can we discuss, how political violence is being exacerbated and how your MP did something that caused a journalist to get death threats, like incessant death threats? I just think that that is irresponsible journalism to not ask those questions. And, I think Catherine's a great journalist. And so it frustrates me to see those moments of like a blind spot. And I don't know why that is, but there's clearly something, the situation that happened here was worsened by members of a political party. And I don't think that it's biased to point that out, because that's literally just what happened. So we need to call it out because it's not okay.
It's just, it's part of the problem, though, because it is only generally coming from one political party. Like, you don't have other MPs, right? Like, and it's like, and that's why like everybody's mired in this both sidesism of everything, or both sides-itis, if we want to make it an affliction. And because there is no kind of left-wing or progressive equivalent of like a Canada Proud, Post-Millennial, Juno News, take your pick, Rebel, whatever, that all work as these digital proxies to amp up whatever it is that the conservatives are putting out there. And then it all kind of works as this machine. There is a skew towards one side that I don't think we're really recognizing or even, acknowledging so that we could do something about it.
Why do you think that is? Why do both of you think that? Rachel, maybe you first. Why do you think there's no left-wing equivalent?
Because the billionaires don't benefit from left-wing policies, so there's no reason for them to fund it. Like Charlie Kirk's organization was initially like basically astroturfed, funded by huge money. Anytime someone goes on Jubilee and says like, racist trash, they become a conservative influencer. There's a whole ecosystem of entertainment that gets lots of money. Turning Point put tons of money into this. There's like, the reason why, like several, some tech journalists in the States have written about this. The reason why there isn't this parallel in the media is because billionaire interests are better protected by right-wing politics. It's just a fact. Like, they benefit from neoliberal policies, from policies that don't tax the rich, from policies that encourage a sort of laissez-faire government. That is just what, like, they make more money from that. So that is why there is not the same equivalent. And also, I think that there's attempts at it. But the problem is that, unfortunately, and there have been studies on this, like, and this is why it's so hard, because it's not biased to point out the facts. And when the facts are that one side, and this is what I was about to say, is unfortunately spreading more mis and disinformation, it doesn't do anyone a service to pretend or exacerbate the times that it happens on the left or on the center, to try to make it look like an equal issue when it is a disproportionate issue on one side. And when you aren't tethered by the facts in that same way, you can tell people exactly what they want to hear. And that is incredibly popular, especially in moments when people are afraid. And that is, like for me, I dealt with a ton of backlash because I think a lot of people started following me thinking that I was some partisan, because I had been so hard on Pierre Poilievre for especially his policies on trans people in this commentary there, and his conspiracy theory dog whistling. But when Carney was elected and started implementing policies that like I viewed as incredibly problematic, and I was very critical of him, all of a sudden, a lot of people were outraged. And like, I got a lot of people canceling subscriptions and stuff. And that puts pressure on you to be biased in a certain direction. But I think that unfortunately, like I don't know why this is the case, but it bears out when you see it in practice that I think that there's just more people with that proportion of willingness to resist that pressure on the political left than there is on the political right. And that's not to say that individuals who are super biased liberal like shills don't exist, because they do. But it's just there's more of that on the right, where people are caving to that and caving to the money that they don't lose by refusing to criticize a certain political perspective.
Go ahead, Supriya. Well, can I get this out of the way? Like, what's going on? What's the deal with Ben Mulroney? Like, there's just appears to be this beef here, and obviously he's just been promoted to like a big new gig, and he's going to be hosting this nationally syndicated political TV show, which is quite a step up, by the way, from what he was doing a short time ago. Wasn't it Canadian Idol or something like that? I digress. Son of the former Prime Minister of Canada. So congratulations to him, I guess. He's earned his stripes for a short period of time on talk radio, and now apparently has his sights set on you. And I've seen him talking more about you publicly, specifically, I think, in the context of the war on Gaza, but in particular, really taking aim at you, which seems to me to be strange for a number of reasons. I'm not between his ears, so I don't know why, but obviously it's something that you have to have an opinion on. You're the target of it. What's going on?
Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm about to start breaking out in Mariah Carey's "Why You So Obsessed with Me," but you know, like I don't know. I mean, I unfortunately came up with the excellent branding that he's Canada's least favorite Nepo baby.
That might be it.
You know,
that
like
might have done it.
Maybe I'm just a little too biting. I think also, frankly, like I'm one of there's a few journalists in Canada, primarily independent, who are covering what the UN has come out and in a report said is a genocide in Gaza. I have been covering that quite aggressively, and he's extremely pro-Israel. He compared calling it a genocide in Gaza to saying the earth is flat. And I don't think he likes when people highlight those things for some reason. And like, if you're going to go on the radio and say stuff, like have the balls to stand behind it, you know, like don't get all pissed off when someone shows the things that you said, like that's, you know, anyway, it just, I don't know what his issue is with me. Maybe, because I reported on the fact that he had donated to the Conservative Party of Canada within the last, like, I guess now it's just over a year, because I think it was like early September that his submission was, and was able to link it to him by finding a contract anyways, it's a whole long thing, but I confirmed it. And it is embarrassing because I think that everyone knows that if it came out that David Cochrane was a regular donor to the Liberal Party of Canada, all of this right-wing ecosystem that we just described of this like so-called media would be going nuts with it. And, you know, so I reported on this and several others have also highlighted it. And I don't know, he just like decided to act like as a weirdo high school bully and be like, I don't even know who she is. And I'm like, and it's embarrassing because he follows me and has vocally criticized me on his show before. So it's like, I think it's a combination of him making embarrassing, like just comebacks that are low-hanging fruit for me to hit back at, and then he gets even more embarrassed and more angry, and also him just having a genuine dislike of the fact that I think I'm doing good journalism exposing his political contributions and questioning whether that is something that should be something that isn't allowed when you are hosting a political show and supposed to be holding politicians' feet to the fire. Like, I just think that that's a really weird ethical breach. So maybe he doesn't like me highlighting that and highlighting the fact that there's a genocide in Gaza. So
I mean, it's also weird because, I mean, Ryan, you were there, I was there, Rachel, you were there, all at Chorus. Like, they have a pretty big delineation between the talk radio opinion folks and the more journalisty, newsroomy type folks. So it just seems weird to put a non-journalist who's a talk radio person at the helm of a flagship political news show.
Yes. And I used to work with people at Global. So, like... you know, I heard the concerns that are circulating internally about this decision. So like, and I have reported on those. So like, it's a wild decision. And it's one that stands like, I got a call from my editor-in-chief because I tweeted that we should reckon with how we report on the Israeli-Palestine conflict and ensure that we are truly comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. That was all I said. And I got a call from my editor-in-chief while I was in Tunisia over that. And this guy's out here tweeting at Mark Carney saying that he should be afraid of Pierre Poilievre. Word for word, he's tweeted that. And we're supposed to think that that's in line with global social media policies. Like, it's just absurd. And I think that rightfully so, a lot of people are questioning, even internally, like how this is going to impact how people view the integrity of their journalists. But luckily for Ben, the same kind of outrage machine that got my CTV fact-checking segment canceled doesn't really exist on the progressive wing to the same degree. So I don't know if, I mean, I think maybe they're just going to ride it out. But there's so many more qualified people. That's a really coveted political journalism job. I remember when I was working in the press gallery, like there were so many people who wanted that job. I bet you there's so many people who were super annoyed that it went to Ben Mulroney who got passed over.
Like Supriya and me.
Of course.
You think we were on the short list, Supriya? Yeah, I should clarify earlier, Supriya, like real talk. For people listening to this on the podcast, when I was teeing up my question earlier, and I say to Rachel, so you got canned from, and you just like winced. And I should clarify, Supriya left on her own volition, resigned. Rachel was laid off. I am the only one of this three-headed monster that was actually fired for cause. So let's be clear. Let's be clear about that. That's probably relevant to the conversation. Rachel, can we keep you for a few more minutes?
Yeah, it's fine.
We want to talk to you about, Supriya and I wanted to get into this Kneecap situation, this Irish band that was apparently banned from Canada, but maybe actually not banned at all. I know you've been digging into that. And Supriya, I know we wanted to touch on Erica Kirk, who's navigating unimaginable territory right now. I know a lot of people are trying to imagine what it would be like to walk a mile in her shoes, but she's facing her own brand of criticism, and that's something that we wanted to put in front of Rachel as well. We're talking to Rachel Gilmore and Supriya Dwivedi in our feature interview today, presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. And as always, we welcome your feedback. If you're listening to this later, shoot us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com.
Edmonton is here because the river is here. So we care for it, protect it, share it. The water of the North Saskatchewan sustains all of us. It's a big job to treat and deliver it, river to tap, to over 1 million people, so you can have and enjoy a glass of the Sask. On tap, made local by Epcor.
California Closets is building and installing the best custom closets and storage solutions for your entire home. Proudly Canadian-owned and operated. You can check out their work online at californiaclosets.ca. Whether it's a dream walk-in closet for that primary bedroom, the one that you've always envisioned, maybe it's turning that home office into a guest room, or vice versa with one of those beautiful Murphy beds, or maybe it's a garage overhaul. You're sick of, losing the spare tires, the shovels, the rakes. 'Tis the season. You're going to need to find that stuff and dig it out again. California Closets can make your garage work a little harder for you, and it all starts with a free consultation. You can book that today at californiaclosets.ca. Don't forget, all of California Closets' work is guaranteed for life. We're coming up on October 1st, so that means your next chance to save 15% on all grocery purchases of $75 or more at Friesen Brothers. Proudly celebrating 70 years, still family-owned. Friesen Brothers has always understood the value of quality time around the dinner table. You can check out their Family Essentials flyer. That's the one we love to use on their website, friesen.com. And don't forget, the 1st of October, 15% off all grocery purchases of $75 or more. And I also want to direct your attention to the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation. You can find them online at givetoroyalalex.org. For 125 years, the Royal Alexandra Hospital has been more than a building. It's been a place where moments of care echo through generations. From the first breath of a newborn to the comfort given in life's hardest moments, every story within these walls sends out ripples, touching families, shaping communities, and inspiring the care of tomorrow. These are the echoes of the Alex. And with your gift, those echoes will continue, carrying forward hope, healing, and compassion for generations yet to come. Show your support today at givetoroyalalex.org. Joined by Supriya Dwivedi, per usual, first episode of every week, and special guest Rachel Gilmore. She's the journalist, the entrepreneur behind Bubble Pop. You can check out more at rachelgilmore.substack.com. Supriya, you and I lucky enough to hang out, spend some quality time together in Toronto over the past couple of days, and I looked you in the eyes and I said, what on earth is going on with this story about Kneecap, this Irish hip-hop trio? And you just laughed and you said, let's ask Rachel. So yeah, Rachel.
I did say that. But just to give folks a bit of a primer here, basically what happened is that you had an MP kind of come out, do a video that looks like a hostage style taking video or whatever, and basically say that Kneecap isn't welcome in Canada, and it's related to a terrorism charge that was leveled at one of the members of this band in the UK, which has now since been dropped. So seemingly the entire, premise for not allowing this group into the country, as was, posited by this Liberal MP, Vince Gasparo, now no longer seems to exist. And as of right now, the question is whether or not there is a formal sort of warning or ban, because the band is saying that aside from the video, they have no government or department officials that have reached out to be able to say that they're actually banned or not.
Rachel, what's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, so there's been some reporting from independent journalist Supriya Dwivedi and now CBC's Rafi Bouchikanian have both done some really good work on this that I haven't been able to independently verify, because they got sources from within the government telling them that it sounds like Vince Gasparo went rogue. Like, he just posted this video saying that this band is banned from Canada, and there wasn't actually a ban, which is just surreal and so embarrassing, both for Mark Carney's government to show this level of lack of discipline within the caucus, and for this guy. What did he think he was going to get out of it? It's literally mortifying. So yeah, I genuinely I don't know what he was thinking. He had met with just a few days prior, a pro-Israel lobbyist group, CIJA, and then a couple days later films this weirdo video. As Supriya said, it definitely looked like a hostage situation. Maybe he was just hostage to his own terrible ideas. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was wild. There's Canadians who had tickets for this event who are now what happens? Are these guys banned? Are they not? The government's being really coy about this. I reached out to the Prime Minister's office, called, left a voicemail, sent emails. I reached out to the Public Safety Minister's office. I haven't gotten a response from any of them. And I don't know if they finally got back to CBC, but when I was chatting with Supriya Dwivedi on the weekend, she told me that she had reached out, CBC had reached out, the Hill Times had reached out, and none of them were getting responses from the government, which just tells me the degree to which this is an embarrassing, what do we do here moment for the government, where this guy just did something wild and no one knows how to make this look like anything other than that.
It's kind of a baller move on behalf of her, right? I mean, if you just go ahead and, they say fake it till you make it, or act like you've been there before. You start pushing out videos and all of a sudden people start listening and bands start canceling their tour dates. It actually works for you. Supriya, you've worked in a PMO before. How big of a deal is it, or what degree of consideration would go into banning a musical act, a comedian, an entertainer, a visitor, a delegate, whatever the case may be, banning somebody from touching down on or performing on Canadian soil?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. And to be quite honest, as being part of a political staff in the Prime Minister's office, we would have been kept out of it for the most part, right? This is something that officials would have done on the back end to assess whether or not an entity is a threat to Canada. So the fact that the MP went out and, made a video to begin with is somewhat odd and is a break from what would be the normal sort of procedure here. But what's even, odder is that, according to reporting, to Rachel's point, it doesn't seem as though this MP in question, Vince Gasparo, gave a heads up to any of the offices, the ministerial offices that would have been impacted by this, including the public safety minister, who, Ryan, has had a bit of a rough go the last week and a bit, right, over the gun buyback stuff. So, I don't know, man, give Gary a break. You could have given him a heads up.
Yeah, we talked to actually a really interesting interview. We talked to Ian Runkle. He's he's a lawyer straight up. He's also he's a legal commentator on YouTube. He's built this massive following. A firearms lawyer, criminal defense lawyer. Interesting interview last week, and talked to him about Gary Anandasangari, the public safety minister's recording with a tenant of his. This is such a wild story for people that aren't familiar with it. Sounds like, the public safety minister is well within his right to own a revenue property, a rental property, and he's like doing a walkthrough with his tenant, but he also happens to be the minister of public safety for the government of Canada. And they're going through and they're like, yeah, drywall looks good, carpet looks good. It's like so the guy's rolling video, like the guy's videoing his like apartment inspection. And then he starts asking the minister about the firearms legislation and TLDR, basically the public safety minister goes, yeah, well, don't worry about it because there's basically not enough, municipal police to enforce this thing. And it's probably not going to happen. And I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says, like, we had to do this because of all those votes in Quebec. You know how that goes. And listen, if you do end up getting arrested, I'll pay your bail. I mean, that's like basically the summary of what the public safety minister says to his tenant. His tenant then posts the video realizing the gold mine that he's sitting on. And then now, the prime minister and the public safety minister, for that matter, put in a pretty tough spot because as they're getting set to roll out what I think is, at least if you're a gun owner or at least if you're a gun enthusiast, pretty contentious legislation on Canada's gun buyback program. This is a pretty tough look for the federal government. So that's the background there with the public safety minister.
Yeah, and then just imagine he gets into his office dealing with this, and he's like, Vince did what?
He might actually be happy about it.
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
I think even worse is the fact when he was asked direct questions in the House about, do you know what a PAL is? That's like the basic license to get a firearm. He's like, no. Do you know what a CFSC, I believe it's called, is? That's the test you have to pass for gun safety. He's like, no. This is the Minister of Safety, Ryan.
Yeah, right? Like it just felt like
basic stuff.
It wasn't even remotely briefed on the file. So it's been a tough look. But bringing it back to the Kneecap thing, I think it's an interesting situation because the Irish, it's an Irish hip hop group for people that aren't familiar, and they faced a terrorism charge. He was exonerated, by the way, in court in the UK. But I know that they've raised a few eyebrows. It puts this government in a tough position. People want to know exactly where it stands on who's calling the shots and what's the truth, right? So yeah, it's kind of a wild story there.
Super wild, and I don't think we're going to get any answers anytime soon, unfortunately.
Hey, before we thank Rachel for her time, and thanks for joining us, Supriya, I know that this is something you and I chatted about and something that you wanted to get to, and that was Erica Kirk. I think I don't even know if I have to offer this qualifier, but let me say, regardless of whether or not you ever listened to Charlie Kirk, regardless of how you feel about his work, regardless of how you feel about the Trump administration, regardless of how you voted, if you voted in Canada, we can all agree that she was thrust into a horrific situation, losing her husband, father of her children, and obviously into the public eye to speak about an unimaginable situation. That is, seeing her husband murdered in front of thousands of people in person and millions of people online. She spoke at length at his memorial service, and I guess life for her in a completely different context, tragic context, begins now. But Supriya, you couldn't help but notice something about some of the criticism that she's been facing.
Yeah, like, look, I mean, I think unless you've had to sort of deal with the kind of grief that she's going through right now, you can shut the fuck up, right? Like, that's what it comes down to. And yeah, like, was I front and center, and did I have a merch table at my husband's funeral? Of course I didn't. He also wasn't a public figure, and the memorial service wasn't in a giant arena. Yeah, like, I guess it's not how a normal person would necessarily grieve. And I do sincerely hope that she has people around her who care about her and her children and, not the business or the empire. But I think, she needs to be doing whatever it is that is going to be good for her and help her deal with this grief, because the number one thing anyone will tell you is that as long as you're doing the things that make you sort of happy, you're going to in turn be a better parent, and now like a widow and single parent to your kids than if you were just, kind of mulling through it and trying to go about your day in a regular way. So I wish, I get it. It's the internet. People are going to be snippy, and I don't expect there to be a lessened degree of snark. And I think we could all sort of raise eyebrows at when we think things are a little bit odd, and that's fine. But I don't know. I've just seen a lot of really just not great stuff being leveled at her. And I think we should, just have some grace here for her.
Well, and Rachel, you were like, I mean, we've already discussed it in this episode, but I mean, you were sort of thrust into part of this conversation, your inclusion on that online list of Charlie's murders and all this kind of wild stuff. And so obviously I know that this hits, more personally for you than a lot of people when we talk about the impact of all of this. But what I can't help but note, and this is not profound, I mean, I see it all around, is it feels like the Kirk murder has changed the game. And I see it in different ways depending on who I'm talking to. For some people, I've had conversations, and I hope that it trends more in this direction. Some people that have said this represents the worst of what happens when things boil over, when things spill over, when someone who's we're learning more about the alleged shooter, but people who are like hyper online, people who are just radicalized, perhaps without even realizing it, not socialized, not supported in social circles. They don't have sort of outlets for what they're feeling, that sort of a thing. Maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call, regardless of where people are on the spectrum, that we need to cool the temperature, that we need to connect with our fellow human beings, etc. And then there's the flip side, which is basically this means war. And we don't even know yet which one it is, but there's no doubt about it. What happened that the second week of September, I think has changed the game and pushed it further than it already was, which is really saying something.
Yeah, I think it's an awful thing that happened and is now being weaponized by many individuals to be an excuse for implementing an increasingly authoritarian agenda by the Trump administration, really. Like they're coming out with these executive orders, as I mentioned earlier, marking Antifa as a terrorist organization in the wake of this, which Antifa, again, is an ideology, a philosophy. It's not when you designate something as a terrorist organization that has no organization, like it has no organizational structure, then you are opening up anyone who adheres to these ideologies, which are effectively just anti-fascism, being labeled as a terrorist and treated as such and prosecuted as such. And that is a terrifying prospect. And so I think that it's frankly, it's so disrespectful. It's disgusting. The way that people, I hope that the takeaway is that we need to turn down the temperature. But I also think that sometimes that line is unfairly thrust on people, because if you've got to put two people in a room, one is a trans person and one is a person who hates trans people, and the person who hates trans people wants to legislate away that trans person's right to gender affirming care and the things that they need to survive, and the trans person gets pissed off and says, hey, like, screw you. Telling them both to turn down the temperature is not a fair response to, a victim and an aggressor. But that being said, like, I do think that it's a horrible thing that happened. And I think that what Supriya said about the way people are reacting to Erica Kirk is extremely accurate. Like, I can't imagine what it's like to live through that. Supriya, unfortunately, like, you are familiar with that feeling. And it's just really disgusting to see people telling others how to grieve. But I think that you can kind of hold space for recognizing how abhorrent that is, while also recognizing the ways in which, and I don't think that you're saying that people aren't, but like, or that I don't think that was something that you were saying people shouldn't be able to do. But that you can also recognize how disgusting it is. And in a way, it is honoring Charlie Kirk's legacy to use this for political points and to implement an agenda that is, I think, probably what he would have wanted in this moment. Not that I know him well enough to say that, but I just think it's really grotesque to weaponize and utilize a senseless, disturbing act that we don't even fully understand the motivation of in this way. And all it speaks to me is that we need to have more of an understanding of the ways in which algorithms are cooking all of our brains and making the world worse. But that doesn't seem to be the takeaway that anyone's having.
So well said, Rachel. We're grateful that you agreed to join Supriya and I in this hangout, and encourage you as if you needed encouragement, but maybe you do. You never know. I was going to say, just keep at it. Keep on doing what you're doing. I want to encourage this audience to support your journalism by subscribing at rachelgilmore.substack.com. We'll link to that in the show notes. You can find Rachel, I think, literally on every social media platform, doing a phenomenal job. I don't know how you do it. It is exhausting.
I'm so tired.
Oh, my gosh, but you're killing it. Congratulations to this point. I said, didn't you just launch a season 2?
I did
recently.
I don't know what I'm thinking, but I had to start it at some point. So
go for
back.
it. Pedal to the metal. No other way, which is great.
Yeah.
And Supriya, obviously, we look forward to our hangouts every single week. We'll talk to you a week from today.
Sounds good, Ryan.
All right. That's Supriya Dwivedi and Rachel Gilmore joining us on a special episode of the show. You can leave a comment on that YouTube episode if that's where you're watching us. You can leave comments on Spotify as well. Shoot us an email anytime if you'd like to add to this conversation. Maybe you feel like, maybe there was something that we didn't touch on or something we didn't get to that's relevant here. We'll get into our live chat, Johnny, powered by Park Power in just a second. Obviously, a ton of comments from across the spectrum. People feel differently about what they're hearing here, and we've touched on a lot of stories too. So we always want to make sure that Real Talkers have the floor. That in just a quick second. These conversations happen with the support of North Road Investment Council. Now that summer is through, we're full on into fall. A lot of you have probably taken that time over the past few months to pause and reflect on your career and retirement goals, and now you're keen to do something about it. At North Road Investment Council, they work with Canadians who've built successful careers and now want to ensure that their wealth is being organized to deliver a successful retirement. The typical North Road client comes from an analytical or a detail-driven profession, an engineer, maybe an architect, a dentist, maybe a pilot. With at least $2 million in investable assets, you know that life's financial journey doesn't always follow that straight path. And so you're looking for expert navigation. You'll find that with Marshall and Carrie and the team at North Road Investment Council. They're open to a conversation. You can connect with them today. Check out their YouTube channel and read a little bit more about what sets them apart, what makes them different, including their digital risk advisory. North Road Investment Council is online right now at northroadic.com. That's where you can find them, northroadic.com. I want to talk to Working Families in Edmonton for a second. Working Families Edmonton, a powerful coalition of community members, activists, and unions, including CSU 52. You've heard us talk about CSU 52 in past on the show. They make sure that City Hall is hearing the voices of working people loud and clear. Working Families Edmonton knows that the capital city in Alberta deserves leaders who put families first, who protect strong public services, and who take bold action for a better future for everybody. Working Families Edmonton is fighting for Edmonton. Are you with them? You can find them online at workingfamiliesedmonton.ca. Check out their candidate endorsements for the 2025 municipal election. That's coming up October 20th. And Working Families Edmonton has chosen those that they're going to put their support behind. You can learn more by checking out workingfamiliesedmonton.ca. And of course, we all know that Canada benefits from a strong energy sector. The oil and gas sector, did you know, supports almost 500,000 jobs across Canada? At last count, 446,000 jobs across the country while generating billions in tax and royalty revenue. The contributions of the oil sands industry is funding roads, bridges, schools, and more. At Pathways Alliance, 6 of Canada's largest oil sands companies are working together to help grow Canada's economy. The Prime Minister spoke about it on this show a short time ago. That was on the 10th of September. If you want to read and learn more about Pathways Alliance and that initiative, you can check it out online at pathwaysalliance.ca. Nice to be back here in our Real Talk studio in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton with the producer of this show, John Hicks, as mentioned, had a chance to step away for a couple days, head out to Toronto on business, and that included a sit-down with Supriya where we sort of plotted out what fall into winter will look like with our weekly segments and talked about sort of where we see this media evolution going, which will include what we'll offer to this audience. But really, Canada's largest city. It's a hell of a thing being out in Toronto when it's happening. We had a lot going on out there, and I'm gonna save some of my Jays comments. I'm commandeering positive reflections today for a shout out there. But man, oh man, an unbelievable weekend in the Big Smoke, and an unbelievable weekend for Canadians that are hoping to see a World Series championship back on Canadian soil. I don't want to get. I'm getting like way too far ahead of myself.
They're doing great. You're allowed to
just mention it for.
You're allowed to. You're allowed. Hey, we're taking down the evil empire of the New York Yankees. We're allowed to be a little,
That's right.
A little, boisterous if you want.
Right? Yeah.
But I saw you also went to one of the best NHL teams in the league's games as well.
We
Leafs.
had
and I'm not joking around when I say, like, I grew up in Ontario. I grew up a Leafs fan. I'm a huge Edmonton Oilers fan now. If I had to go in order, I've told you I'm an Oilers fan first, Leafs second. But like, I still follow the Leafs.
Yeah.
It's close to my heart because I was a kid, but obviously working here and just Connor McDavid, the whole thing, I just got sucked into Oilers Nation.
Yeah.
But I will say that, and you know it now too, and you've got to admit, like, it is one of the best barns in the league. You've got Montreal, I know.
Yeah.
You've got Winnipeg. They've got their thing. Oilers, obviously, over the last 5-6 years, it's become an incredibly loud barn as well. But there's just something about being in that barn as well. They are very, very loyal fan base. They are very loud, and it's a cool experience being there. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was really neat, and we had a chance on the Saturday. So that the Jays have this series against the Rays, and I think everybody that was paying attention to it knows that with the Yankees playing well against the Orioles, the Jays basically had to win all their games. That's kind of what it came down to. That was the short story. And so our son, who's turning 10, this was his 10th birthday present to go out and see the Jays, his favorite team. We had no idea when we booked the flights and got the tickets that it was going to be coming down to the wire. Games like 161 and 162 of a 162 game season to see who's going to win the AL East, who's going to be the division champs. So it kind of worked out great, but we thought we could kind of surprise him and squeeze in a Leafs preseason game. They were hosting the Montreal Canadiens. Pretty great original six rivalry.
That is the game to be at.
It's the game to be at,
in Ontario,
right?
Yeah.
So we go to the Jays game, and they get out on top against the Rays on the Saturday. This is the second last game of the season. And then we just start walking, and you're just walking on Front Street, and we start walking just basically towards the hockey arena, but he has no idea, right? And so we walk in, and I'm kind of watching him to see like when he's going to put two and two together, and you could see the evolution of the wardrobes. Like there were Jays jerseys everywhere, Jays, and then all of a sudden
merge.
And then they merge, and then all of a sudden now it's Leafs and Habs jerseys, right?
I would suspect there was Jays jerseys at the game everywhere
for sure,
as well. Yeah.
including us.
Just, yeah.
And so then we start walking through a turnstile, and I'm like, he's got to put to it. He's got to figure this out right now. And then the guy, the ticket taker, looks at him and says, "Enjoy the game." And Wyatt turns around to me and he goes, "Enjoy the game? Enjoy what game?" And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, he's on the concourse and we're at the Toronto Maple Leafs game, and he absolutely lost his mind. But yeah, really special time together. Had a chance, lucky enough to stay at the Fairmont Royal York, right there in the heart of downtown Toronto, this historic hotel. Yeah. They're coming up on their 100th anniversary, which I didn't realize, but just I think it feels like the hotel in Toronto. Just a beautiful environment there. You know who I ran into there? I wanted to shout out James Grant. If you're in the Edmonton or the Alberta hospitality community, you'll know James Grant. You can look him up on Instagram at Old Gray Rabbit. This guy, when he was in Edmonton, when he was living in Edmonton, he won the world-class Global Bartender of the Year. This is a competition that goes down, literally bartenders from all around the world compete for top honors, and James won that in 2021, and we ran into him by chance at the Library Bar at the Royal York, where he's now the beverage director for the Fairmont Royal York. And I honestly felt, and I said this to him, I said, I feel like Edmontonians can celebrate his journey to this point, winning Global Bartender of the Year, and now rolling out these. You can check out my Instagram stories if you want to see more, but this new beautiful cocktail list there, and they've done a beautiful job. So a lot of fun. Wrapped up the trip with the final game, and I'll talk more on that in a second. Jays Rays, and a huge win for the Jays, probably their biggest game in 10 years. And then a quick stop in at the Toronto Aquarium before we got to the airport, because why wouldn't you try to jam pack every single second that you have on a trip like this? So we surrounded ourselves with stingrays and nurse sharks and starfish and all kinds of cool stuff. So a beautiful few days away. But of course, everything's happening out there in Toronto as well. I'm always trying to pay attention to like what people are talking about, what's making news. Obviously, everybody's talking about the Jays right now. But politics too. I think people are kind of getting back into it. You see Ontario's Premier Doug Ford has taken a step similar to what Alberta's premier did in basically yanking photo radar away.
Yeah,
he says
I
can't remember his exact words, something along the lines of like it's unconstitutional.
So what is it?
Well, the
just
cities,
before we go further,
a lot
here
of the cities are
we
pissed
don't-
off at him.
We don't have photo radar, but we still have the red lights catchers,
I think
right?
we still have the red light cameras. I'm
Yeah.
not sure, but
I
the
think-
province
yeah.
has basically
I
said.
saw someone get dinged the other day on Gateway. So
Yeah.
no photo radar except in school zones, I'm pretty sure, right?
Well, and this has been a story I think for a long time, because the municipalities will tell you, and typically when we're saying municipalities, generally we're talking chiefs of police, but also mayors, that photo radar it generates such a huge amount of revenue that
Oh
it's
my
so
God.
important to their
Especially
budgets.
in Toronto. That's
right?
that's like $40-50 million.
Yeah, and so if you look
annually.
at, sort of like how basically police budgets have been covered in large part.
Okay,
it's in the tens of millions of dollars.
I've got it here. So yes, Alberta still has photo radar, but significantly restricted. So you can't have them on provincial highways and connectors. It is still being used in schools, playgrounds, and construction zones.
Yeah. So and I feel like most people, there's some people that
think
just
most people can agree
adamantly
with
hate
that,
photo
though.
radar.
Yeah.
But I feel like in things like school zones,
Kids, yeah, for sure.
right?
Yeah.
I almost feel like anybody, and construction zones for that matter too. Although I will say, like driving home, we're driving home from the airport at 3:00 in the morning.
You're in a construction zone the whole time.
You're in a construction zone the entire time. And there's nobody there. We're going to get an email from somebody that works in construction. You're going to school me on why it has to be this way.
Don't even start
But
people
they've
on
got-
construction in Edmonton
Well,
right
dude,
now, right?
and there's nobody on the road. There's no construction
That's the worst
happening.
part. Like, hey, shout out to all you guys and gals who are out there, and that's why we're going slow, because we don't want to hit you. And I know I'm sitting in traffic, and it takes an hour or 45 minutes instead of 26 minutes to get to work, and I'm thinking, we're bettering the city. We're bettering the city. But what pisses us off is right now there are so many roads downtown that are 4-lane down to 1, and this road is blocked off, and take an alternate route, and 3 lanes of a section of the highway is down to 1. But I don't see anyone working. And it's 8 in the morning. It's 7:30 in the morning. It's 7 in the morning. So that's what gets people upset, right?
Yeah. So that's the big. Yeah. So the city of Toronto is like going head to head with the premier. And like if you're the provincial government, and I'm sort of like oversimplifying this whole conversation, whether you're Alberta or Ontario, it's not particularly your concern. And by that, I mean, it's not your political problem if you have a budget shortfall for policing based on eradicating photo radar, right? If you're the provincial government, you can enjoy the benefits that come with the public support
huge.
of eliminating photo radar,
right away,
It's a win for you. There will be some people that will speak out against it.
Of course.
A lot of the sort of like public safety groups will say that, photo radar like is demonstrably reduces, collisions and high risk intersections.
It's a fact. It does.
Cuts down on fatalities or traffic injuries and the like. But at the end of the day, people can't stand it. People don't like it. I read an Andrew Coyne column just the other day about photo radar and talking about the spirit of a Western democracy and a free society, and how cops should have to fish with a line, not with a net. It was kind of an interesting argument, but for municipalities, it's a really big deal, right? If the city of Edmonton or the city of Toronto is going to be out 30 or 40 or 50 or $100 million annually, because the province has pulled photo radar away, then all of a sudden those municipalities have a real problem to solve when it comes to their bottom line.
And I'm hearing people talk about this over the weekend on social media, online, on the radio, about the numbers. So, like, if you take Edmonton, for example, last year we had 26 fatalities involving speeding in the city. Now, this year, we've had 21.
Yeah.
And that's since we've, rolled back so the year's not done yet. So if you put the numbers up, yeah, that's not good, right? We know that the numbers show that when people are afraid and they speed less people get killed, right? But at the same time, as soon as somebody says no more tickets, I mean, of course you're going to line up behind them and be like, yes.
Well, I think and people just, I don't know, for photo radar for some reason, I guess I feel this way too, although if I was held on a debate stage with a formidable opponent that backed me into a corner and forced me to explain my view, I might have to acknowledge that it's a bit shallow. But I think people just like the idea that it's a fair game. That cops have to catch you in the act, and that photo radar is just fish in a barrel. And we acknowledge, while there are no demerits and the fine in a photo radar ticket scenario goes to the vehicle owner, by that we also acknowledge that we're not truly enforcing. Like, if you get a ticket, 6 weeks after something, do you remember if you did that? Do you remember if you were even the one driving? Do you remember, like, are we truly?
Well, I'm always the one driving, but like, I don't remember.
Is it truly dropping speed in those intersections?
Yeah.
Like, the next time you get a photo radar, or the next time you travel down that route, are you going to remember you got a photo radar ticket, or are you going to keep an eye out if you see the minivan, and if you don't see it, go along your merry way?
I will say that since I got my Apple Watch, and I've been I get reminders now. I have my phone. I've got it open on Google Maps. Like, I know what the speed is. It tells me when I'm going too fast. It tells me when there's a trap coming. It tells me when there might be an accident ahead. So, and that's just me. That's not me trying to avoid like getting caught. It's also like I've been trying to drive safer as I get older, because maybe that is like a getting old thing too. But it's just, when you're younger, you kind of, you're late for stuff. You kind of speed to work. Now I'm like, what's, is it 5 minutes late for work, or, somebody, losing their life? You kind of, obviously, which one to pick. But this one by Ford, like, obviously this is going to garner him a ton of support. He's like the guy now. Like, I just looked it up. It's 41 million or something last year they got from photo radar alone in Toronto and surrounding areas. So it's huge. Yeah. That's a lot of money out of taxpayers' pockets.
Calgary mayoral candidate. He's going to be, by the way, participating in our Real Talk Calgary mayoral candidate debate on the 10th of October. That's a Friday. Jeremy Farkas in our live chat powered by Park Power says, hot take, if you speed, you should pay the fine. Well, yeah. Scarlett's in there. Scarlett says, I hate photo radar, but I got to say, I just took it as my breaking the rules tax. Like, okay, yeah, you got me. I'll pay up.
Yeah, I recently switched insurance as of today. Car insurance. Yeah, I got a pretty good rate, but they do that whole thing where they ask you. They're like, hey, have you been pulled over? You
don't have to disclose photo radar.
You don't have to disclose photo radar, but, and I'll be honest about this, I was going about 15 or 20 over in a construction zone on the Henday. Early morning, no one was there, and that's why I didn't really see, it was just one of those ones where the two signs, right? Entering construction, missed it.
Yeah.
And so I just said to them, hey, about 3 years ago I did this and I was a bad boy.
Wow.
And they said, you know what? That's not bad. If it comes up, your whatever will go up 30% or whatever. But I got a pretty good.
That's a
lot. It is, but it didn't. When they gave me the quote, it was pretty reasonable. But like, that wasn't a moment where I was like late for something or I was trying to speed. I just missed a sign. And namely, the main reason it happened is because there was no one around working. There was no dump trucks. There was no people. There was no guy flagging. There was no cones. There was just a simple sign, right? So. Yeah. I don't think most people get in their car in the morning and think, I can't wait to go 120 in an 80. You know what I mean? I don't think that's what happens. I think most people, they get a little held up and they have to make up a little time in certain areas. And so they put their pedal down a bit, right?
Tracy D in our chat says, can you imagine the chaos if the expected slower speeds were hit or miss, depending on if there happened to be someone there? She says, or not there, as the case may be. Chaos, she says, it has to be all or nothing. Don is watching us live from Ottawa, our nation's capital. What's up, Don? Says, I think it's bloody stupid to get rid of photo radar and let the cops do their real jobs instead of sitting around holding a radar gun. That's always been an argument, too, is that when you do have real cops really pulling people over, you're also going to have people, intercepted for like driving impaired, for example, stolen vehicles. I could come up with more, sort of shocking examples. Maybe there's been some sort of, I don't know. I'm not trying to get ridiculous and justifying having real cops pull people over instead of photo radar, but even just impairment alone.
Well, yeah, and I think it dissuades. I think deterring people by having a person in a truck or a car, because you know when they're coming, because it comes up on your phone and your maps or whatever, or everyone starts to slow down and you're like, what? I think that's more of a deterrent than a flash when you're going through a thing, is seeing an actual person. But I do know, I think we talked about this before, like all of those, drive safes, those aren't actual cops, right?
Right,
the drive
correct.
Safes,
No,
right?
they're like photo radar
but
operators.
Still, I think things like that, and when you see cops on the side of the road, I think those are more of a deterrent than getting a flash
100%
from behind you. And but I also know that's more of a cost. It has to be to employ people to do that rather than having a camera do it.
Yeah, probably. Ms. B says, honestly, it makes me roll my eyes when people claim that most would police themselves and don't need penalties for things like speeding. Said it would be nice if that were true, but it's absolutely not. How about this one from Matthew? This should actually be a positive reflection. Matthew says, this will be unpopular, but I love all the construction. Matthew says, I know. He says, it makes me happy seeing our infrastructure taken care of and not left to decay. And he says that things like the LRT are generational investments. Matthew's not wrong.
And I do like that, like, huge sections of downtown are being, and the south side are being repaved, and, they're adding like walkways and stuff like that. And that's the same thing I think when I see it.
Yeah.
I just told you, I keep repeating in my head, we're improving our community. We're improving our downtown infrastructure. We won't have to do as much next summer, right? That's what I keep saying to myself.
Grateful that Rachel agreed to join us and talk so candidly and so frankly about her experience and just what's been going on with her. It's like I said, and you try to sort of frame the question in responsible fashion because all of the attention, and again, I'm not trying to sort of gloss over all the horrific comments and really kind of the state of public discourse right now, especially I think aimed at people like Rachel. But, on one hand, you're trying to get as an entrepreneur and as a storyteller, as a journalist, an independent journalist, which is what she is, you're trying to get as many eyes and ears on your stories and on your coverage as possible. But the cost that comes with, and some of the, just the next level of the just the poison and the threats and the aggression and everything that she's facing. It's like when she spells it out, when she lays it out and talks firsthand about it, like she did to Supriya and I this morning, it's really shocking. And nobody would blame her, I think, for fading away and stepping out of the public, stepping out of the public eye, stepping out of the limelight, shutting down what she's doing. At the same time, she's covering a lot of stories that very few mainstream outlets are covering. And I think now, at a time where I think that we need more, and I use the word on purpose, courageous journalism than ever before. I commend her of what she's doing, but even just seeing in the live chat while she's here, she had her big supporters, she had her detractors, she had outspoken critics at it in the live chat, pretty wild to see. What was it like for you to hear her talk about her experience firsthand? Oh,
well, I know her experience because I've been following it. But what shocks me the most is like some of the messages she gets. Like some of them we couldn't even show today.
I know.
Like we showed one that was, I think everyone saw that one in direct message and thought it was vile, and that's not even the worst of it. So, I mean, when people say, well, she did this to herself, she's making a living. She's being part of the conversation. She's an award-winning journalist, no matter how much you want to argue against it. And the thing she's getting, like, imagine if that was your daughter or your you know what I mean? Or your mother or anyone in your family, like being called these names.
I mean,
like
the
I'd
stuff
be,
they're talking
if
about
I was getting those messages, I'd be scared to leave the studio and walk to my car.
Yeah.
It's pretty frightening stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And hearing her talk about it, and I don't think it's a surprise. I'm grateful that, for her own safety that she does it. But even, she says when she's got friends visiting from out of town or whatever, if they're with her in her apartment or her house, wherever she lives, she doesn't want like the exterior of the house in photos. She doesn't want them, with the window in the background so people can place where she is. I mean,
sure,
starting to think that way or having to think that way, because you never know when one of those threats or one of those comments is for real, when it's somebody that is unhinged and that is inclined to act on how they're feeling toward her. Like the whole Charlie Kirk thing, and he's certainly not the first to be targeted. And really, I mean, we have to keep saying this to be responsible in our commentary. We still don't really know why he was targeted. We don't know a lot about the motivation of the shooter, and you're going to hear a bunch of different accounts. And I guess the public, eventually will probably, including us, have, a little bit more of a light shine on the motivation there. There are, really dissenting accounts and different interpretations of what motivated that shooter.
Yeah,
but Charlie Kirk, not the first one targeted.
No.
But it's always like you hear these stories when it's like, there was threat after threat after threat after threat, and then all of a sudden one, boom, happened and was real, so to speak. Not that all the threats aren't real, but I think that a lot of people would be inclined to say, oh, it's words, or they're trying to scare you, or these are keyboard warriors, these are anonymous trolls, they're bots, don't pay attention to them. When it's you that's being targeted, when you're the recipient of those types of threats, and in particular when some of them are like she shared, threats of physical violence, like very real threats of physical violence, and you don't feel like the police are taking them seriously, or just straight up the police are not taking them seriously. We could talk to people that are survivors of domestic violence. We could talk to people that have been involved in workplace conflicts like this before, and that's a common refrain that you'll hear from people, is that threats are not taken seriously until they manifest themselves. And what type of human being is okay with waiting until a threat manifests itself until it's taken seriously?
100%. I think nowadays with the temperature, we should take them all seriously. But also in regards to like what the motive of the Charlie Kirk shooter, or even, the Trump assassination, well, he's dead, obviously, but what that shooter was motivated by, who cares? Like, I don't own this person because I lean left. Like, this person isn't part of my team. I'm not taking responsibility for someone who's unhinged. And I'm going to say that. Like, people keep saying, well, why do you say it's mental health issues? Because anyone who murders someone in cold blood in broad daylight, who's premeditated it and thought about it for weeks, months, days, hours, I don't care, has problems. And the fact that people are saying, well, if it's a right-leaning person or a left-leaning person, like that side has to own it. No, they don't. I don't care if this was MAGA or if this was a crazy lefty. It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't mean that I have to take responsibility for it because I fall on a certain side of a line. It's just ridiculous. Whoever did this was messed up, and those messed up people, we need to watch out for them. And that's not to say that they're all dangerous, but that's another reason we need more mental health initiatives. That's another reason we need to be a little bit kinder to each other. It's not all, I was going to swear there, it's not all freaking kumbaya, but it's like the reason that people go to these extremes is because they're alienated, because they're angry, because they're not being listened to, because they have deeper seated issues that may be in childhood or growing up or whatever. And yeah, some people maybe have had all the good things growing up, and then something pisses them off, and that's okay too. But to make one side own these people is just ridiculous to me.
Yeah. I think I shared this before on the show, but I listen a lot to Scott Galloway, Prof G, and he does a great show with Kara Swisher, and they were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and he just basically was saying that one of the things that he's very much troubled by, and I would share his feeling on this, is that in particular, and shooters are not exclusively young white males, but they are often young white males. And he was talking about how he's troubled by the fact and by this trend that there's a real disconnect from people socially, and that fewer and fewer people are actually getting out in healthy peer circles and healthy peer groups. And I would say, like Ryan talking, one of the things that characterizes a healthy peer group is where there is healthy disagreement, where people feel differently about things like, politics or social issues or religion or whatever the case may be, where you're around people that you respect and you're around people that you trust, and you can hash out different ideas, and you can debate one another, and you can, be in a safe space. Yeah. And when people are, and I'm speaking in generalities here, but when we look to a worst case scenario, like a mass shooter incident or like an assassination, like what happened with Charlie Kirk, or in other situations, a lot of times it's people that have like completely lost touch with reality. They're so they're so hyper online that they have really very few meaningful relationships, if any. They're not invested. They don't have people checking up on them.
100%.
They don't have people asking them how they're doing. They don't have outlets.
And some of them may even be, I'll just say it, looking for celebrity. I mean, these days, recognition. Somebody just said it in the chat. I think people are kind of obsessed. They're in this online social world where likes and boosts and retweets and all these things kind of fuel, your daily positive, feeling about the world. And I just think some people may do it for recognition. And I'll just mention, I know we haven't talked about it yet, but I'm sure you saw Saturday night in North Carolina. Like, it happens. It's all types of people. A Marine veteran in custody after he killed 3 people. He drove up in a boat alongside a bar along the water and just shot like what do you call it when somebody just is apples in a barrel or whatever it is?
Fish in a barrel.
They were just sitting ducks, all these people, and just shot into a crowd. It was premeditated. They found out later when they questioned him, and so 3 people are dead. So, I mean, this is a war veteran. This is someone who's respected, a Marine. And so, I mean, this can happen to anyone, and it's usually for mental health issues, but I agree with you these days that, like, alienation is one of the biggest things. Like, we need to stop pushing people into corners and pushing them into like the little chat rooms on the internet. We need to talk to people more. And especially if they don't have an opinion that's the same as yours, don't shut people out for that. Because, I mean, I saw somebody put something online the other day. I think it was Ricky Gervais, who was like, he was talking about how people who are angry, like if you respond to them, that's their poison, right? Just gets them more angry. So just ignore them. And I was like, man, no, we don't need to ignore these people.
Yeah, we
need to bring these people into the fold and ask them, why do you think like that? Okay, explain to me what, but more importantly, what happened to make you think that? You know what I mean? Like, stop pushing people out.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line too. Like, we talk on this show a lot about like seek to understand, and try to understand where people are coming from and hear out different points of view and actually, participate in that art of discourse that we think is so important. And on the flip side, people will say not amplifying or platforming, harmful beliefs. We're not going to, we're not going to bring somebody on, explain to us why you think whatever.
In the case of these shooters, like the Vegas shooter, we have no idea. He's dead. The Trump shooter, I mean, we kind of have an idea, but he's dead. Like, we never get to talk to these people after the fact and really dive in and talk to them for years when they're in custody and say, why did you do this, right?
Alicia C. in our chat says, it boggles my mind when folks dismiss threats as just words. When it comes down to it, words are all we have, and they need to be taken seriously. Cat Rex says, anybody who thinks that Rachel's being silly or trying to boost her social profile is a misogynist loser. I saw Kyle earlier in the chat talking about how, Rachel always thinks it's the right wing's fault. Rachel always thinks it's right wingers' fault. I thought it was an interesting part of that conversation. If you're just joining us in our live stream presented by California Closets, go back and watch the beginning. We talked to Rachel Gilmore along with Supriya Dwivedi, just about how, and again, this is not a right-left thing, but like Rachel's being piled on by what Supriya described as the right-wing attack machine, and how interesting it is. I asked her, why do you think that there's no real equivalent on the left to the organized attack that we see on the right? It's like this I mean, it's really quite effective, to be honest with you. I thought her response about billionaires' interests was kind of cut right to the chase. But again, Real Talkers, we always want to hear what you have to say. Perhaps you have a submission. If it's a hot enough take for the flamethrower, that comes at you, our final episode of every week, presented by our friends at the DQs. of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park.
How hot does it have to be? Because I don't know. Our submission last Friday was steam. It was
in song form.
It was a poker in the fire, getting ready to brazen on someone's butt.
If
hot.
you didn't hear it was Gordon,
Jesus.
right? Wasn't it Gordon, I think, that did it? Real Talker Gordon submitted like a full-blown song.
Gordy.
Performed.
Gordy.
Unbelievable. It was a first ever for the flamethrower.
No, we won't do it again. But
way to play it. This is an original track, by the way.
It was great.
I thought he did a really good job. What was it? I think he called it says, she says one thing and does another, right?
Yeah. And,
he's got real chops.
Not a comment on his political views, just a comment on the production in general. Played all the instruments.
Pretty good.
Pretty good vocals.
Pretty good by Real Talker Gord. And that was highlighted and featured a first in this most recent episode of The Flamethrower. That does mean, though, because we had a bunch of emails from other people. Some of them followed up and wrote into the show, and they were like, are you going to get to some of our emails next week? The answer is yes, we will.
But if you want to hear the full song, it's at the very end of the show on Friday.
Yeah.
On Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff. I want to get to a positive reflection to wrap this episode and officially launch us into our week. Before we do, though, I want to make sure that UCAN Youth Services is on your radar. They've now had the keys to their new location, downtown Edmonton, right across the street from Grant MacEwan University, for about a month. And that means that construction, John, is underway. They're transforming this beautiful location, a heritage building. Matthew's going to be happy. There's more construction. But this within the walls of the new UCAN HQ, it means they're going to be able to double their service offerings as they help young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. That includes their Road to Work programs that's placing young adults into construction careers. They've got the Verdo project, which is kind of geared more toward hospitality careers if you're 18 to 24. And you just need a leg up. You need somebody to open a door for you, but you're motivated. You're willing to show up to their pre-employment programs. These are like 7 to 8 week programs. And honestly, you just want a better life for yourself. If this is describing somebody that you know, perhaps, and you'd like to work together with the team at UCAN to build hope, you can check out their website. That's ucan.ca. They've got a capital campaign underway. They're hoping to raise $2.5 million. We are committed to helping them get there. Learn more about it at ucan.ca. An absolutely incredible gift from Diane and Irving Kipnis has launched a new era of health research at the University of Alberta. This is the Diane and Irving Kipnis Health Research Institute that'll bridge the gap between scientific discoveries and health outcomes, also going to accelerate the translation of research into real-world care and improve the lives of patients across the country. This, by the way, a $25 million gift. It means that Canadians are going to see the future of healthcare transformed, but that requires more than just advancing science. They need to put patients and communities at the center of all they do, from prevention to therapies, interventions that improve lives and lead to better outcomes. They are building that at the University of Alberta. You can learn more about how the Diane and Irving Kipnis Health Research Institute is driving change by visiting uab.ca/Kipnis. That's uab.ca/Kipnis. And coming up Thursday of this week, another edition of Alberta Wins, presented by our friends at Play Alberta. This is a weekly feature celebrating Alberta's wins on the national or international stage. I want to talk to you now about how Alberta wins with Play Alberta. Not only is it the most safe and secure way to bet casino, sports, and lottery online, and not only does all revenue go right back to the province, which is big, but Albertans are winning big every single day. 10, 50, even as much as $100,000 is won daily on Play Alberta. And best of all, for a limited time only, if you check out their website, playalberta.ca, you'll see the details. New players can receive a $1,000 casino bonus. Download the Play Alberta app, check out all the great offers, and get started today at playalberta.ca. All right, well, I'm going to be selfish, John, for this episode, this edition of Positive Reflections presented by our friends at Solar by Kuby. Typically to kick off, and this is on purpose, the first episode of every week. We know that some of you may have a case of the Mondays. We want to give you something where we step outside of the news headlines. Not entirely true today. It's all over the news headlines, but it's a positive reflection presented by our friends at Solar by Kuby. And I want to go back to this amazing opportunity that we had over the past few days to head out to Toronto, in particular Rogers Centre, and to see the Toronto Jays, the Blue Jays in action, in this case against Tampa. And coming up next weekend, who knows who they'll take on? Will it be the Bo Sox? Will it be the Yankees? The Toronto Blue Jays, we're lucky enough to get out on field there. You see Buck Martinez in his signature blazer, getting the intel, getting the details before that broadcast on Sportsnet. But out there for batting practice, you could just see that the Jays were feeling it. George Springer in particular, hitting a few dingers off the batting coaches. And of course, who else was out there, Johnny? It was Alejandro Kirk, the Jays catcher who became a fan favorite through the year. And then over this weekend, the couple of games that we were able to see, 3 home runs over the past 2 games against Tampa to absolutely solidify that win and send the Toronto Blue Jays on their way with momentum into the postseason. Like 50,000 fans. There you can see the final out as the celebration unfolded. The Toronto Blue Jays, their first AL East Division championship in 10 years, and all of Canada is ready to see the Jays in the postseason again. Now, this is a team that has some star power, to be sure, but it's not the big stars. It's not the big names that have gotten them to this point. It's the everyday players. It's the guys that the average baseball fan may not be too familiar with, but this is a team that is clicking at the right time, we hope, and a team that could make some noise as major leagues. There's nothing like playing ball in September and October, my man. Let's get through September first. We'll talk about October later. But the Toronto Blue Jays, the pride of a nation, truly Canada's team. And what a thrill to be there with 50,000 other people in person celebrating the Jays' first AL East Division championship in a decade. Shout out to all the Jays fans out there that have endured some leaner years, and to everybody. There's lots of room on the bandwagon if you'd like to jump on, like we have, quite frankly, and we'll share that enthusiasm for as long as this run lasts. Positive Reflections is proudly presented by our friends at Solar by Kuby. You can get a free solar quote today by visiting Kuby.ca. That's Kuby.ca. If something made your day, a random act of kindness, maybe somebody paid something forward, you saw a story in the news or on your social media feed that made your week, we want to hear about it. Send us an email to talk@RyanJesperson.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Real Talk. Thanks for subscribing wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And we'll talk to you 22 hours from now, the next episode of Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out RyanJesperson.com.